We are happy to have Julie Sweetland with us from Frameworks Institute for the last time, but hopefully you all will be able to see Frameworks again through some technical assistance opportunities that are available to you. So I will go ahead and go through our, here we go, go through our agenda and a few little housekeeping things. So again, we have Frameworks joining us today. The discussion will be about reclaiming the vaccination conversation. Oops, my slide. And then we have the evaluation at the end of our session again today. And I do want to thank you all again for taking the time to submit the evaluation. We've been working to incorporate your feedback and really, really appreciate your thoughts and comments that you all share with us. So please join by video if possible and mute your line when not speaking. For our evaluation partners, it is really helpful if you can add your 2-letter state abbreviation to your name in Zoom. And so to do that, you hover over your icon there where it says your name or shows your picture. And next to the mute button, there are 3 little dots, that burger, you can hit that. And then you can rename yourself. Also, please feel free to add your pronouns as well if you'd like to do that. And then also, please feel free to use the chat function to add your questions or comments. And the meeting is being recorded, and we will share that out with you all in our next newsletter. So again, this slide shows the 6 conditions of systems change and our practical application workshop partner capacity building activities. So we are in the last session with Frameworks Institute, which is addressing mental models. And then the next 3 months, we'll be working through relationships and connections and power dynamics. So the relational change components of the model, and we'll have ovation and boundary spanning leadership for those presentations for the next 3 months. And so just a few announcements and reminders before I pass it to Julie. We have, as I mentioned, for those that were on the line at the top of the hour, we do have technical assistance available to you all through the practical application workshop partners. And so that information was shared in last month's newsletter. It's also on the cohort SharePoint site. We'll send that out again. We really do hope that some of you are interested in these opportunities and working with our partners such as Frameworks, Georgia Health Policy Center, and Ovation. The next newsletter will be coming to your inbox on October 10th. And so these are a couple things to keep an eye out for. You will have an update about the journey mapping activity, and you will start to receive emails from Deshaw Stockton on the journey mapping. We do have some updates on the Stretch 2.0 Summit that will be coming to folks who are attending that. And then we do have a new micro-learning that is hot off the press that was just pushed out by our colleagues at ASTHO, and that one is called Tools to Operationalize Equity, Utilizing the Stretch Framework. So you'll be receiving all of that information here in the next few weeks. And so with that, I will now pass it to Julie. Oh, Julie, you're muted.
Thanks so much, Dorothy. Give me 1 second as I get into my PowerPoint here. All right, it's good to see everyone. Thanks for joining today. Our topic today is reclaiming the vaccination conversation. Before I say too much, I would love to hear a little bit more about what's going on regarding vaccination in your context. So we got 2 ways to start off this conversation for you all to contribute. You can either raise your digital hand and we'll call on you. You can share verbally, or you can add your thoughts to the chat. And so I'm particularly curious in your state, in your local context, probably state, but what vaccination policies, if any, have been introduced or passed that threaten public health and or health equity. So for instance, I know in some states, they've passed policies that require affirmative consent kind of a double opt-in for some youth, particularly youth in systems of care and that sort of thing. Weakening of school mandate, requirements for school entry. So particularly around children vaccinations, but it really could be anything. Just curious, what struggles are you up against in your setting?
I don't know if I'm like the right person to answer this question for my agency, but we are seeing in regards to specific subpopulations in our state. For example, the Ukrainian population in South Carolina, we're seeing higher numbers of vaccine hesitancy amongst them. Um, and higher numbers of like religious exemptions for newborn screenings for families of like families who are homeschooled or families who are giving birth through doula or midwifery services.
Okay. So you're seeing evidence of decreased confidence, but it didn't sound like you had a policy in mind. So for instance, there have been some states that have added religious exemptions or added philosophical exemptions, but that wasn't what you were speaking to. But yeah, it's exactly part of the context. Anyone else? I will say it's the first public health group that has not had 1,000 things to say about it. So I don't know, maybe you all requested reframing on vaccination. So just curious to hear where that was coming from. All right. Well, we'll do a little quick poll if people aren't feeling chatty. And this maybe will offer us some clarity. Dorothy, if you could make the poll go. Simple question. In the last year, has your Stretch 2.0 coalition, whatever that looks like, have you all communicated externally about childhood vaccination issues? Is that a yes, a no, or a not sure for you? Dorothy, it doesn't look to me like people can answer. Is there another button we need to push so people can?
I think there's 12 of 27 participants
Okay.
that have answered. Do you want me to end it?
Give it another moment. It's just, I'm used to seeing it as a co-host rather than just a participant. So I was looking for that number. So if it looks like it stopped, we can reveal the answers.
Okay, give folks a few more seconds. Oh, we just had a couple more come in. Um, okay, I'll end it and share results.
Okay.
Okay, are you seeing that?
Yeah. All right. So it looks like maybe fewer of us are actually talking about this issue. About a little bit more than half of us are definitely not talking about this issue, and some of us are not sure. All right. Well, I'm absolutely sure that all of you are in a context where the conversation about vaccination has changed, right? It's changed definitely since the pandemic, but it was changing before the pandemic. I remember in 2018. We had a meeting at Frameworks with the American Academy of Pediatrics, and it was on another topic. I think it was on a traumatic brain injury for infants. And in that at that time, we got into a side conversation about just how toxic the conversation about kids' vaccinations had gotten, right? With some parents opting out, other parents, pointing fingers at them, friendships being broken up, a lot of, finger pointing in the media. And this was, you were like, this is not going well. And AAP shared that a lot of their members, right, their pediatricians were saying, oh my gosh, we're spending so much more time in routine wellness visits talking through vaccine hesitancy, vaccine misinformation. And that's, fine. The pediatricians are happy to answer the questions, but of course that comes at a cost of some of those developmental, check-ins and screenings that they might be having, or other kinds of conversations. So we really wanted to take on a project then, couldn't find a funder. Something happened in 2020 where suddenly a lot of funding became available for talking about vaccinations. So we were delighted to have a chance to take that on. So I'm going to share some of this work today. There's there's 2 reports and a toolkit, and then another tool, 3 reports. One that's about American public thinking, again, those mental models on vaccines, not just quick attitudes, but those deeper ways of modeling the issue that really help us get underneath it and shift a whole system of thinking and policy and resources. Empirical research where we tested different ways of talking about the issue and found some that fall flat, some that make the problem worse, and some that I think can really change the conversation. And then we have also built that into 2 toolkits. One that's very much focused on changing the surround sound on the issue, boosting public discourse, and one that's more focused on taking that same research and applying it for talking with families. We built that in partnership with the National Association of School Nurses. So thinking about in a more of a public health type of setting, public schools, how can those school nurses lead effective conversations with families who were specifically considering or had not yet taken the COVID-19 vaccine in particular. Although these resources in general we built them and they were created in the context of the pandemic, and so that was top of mind for participants. We're really trying to get into the conversations around all of the vaccinations where people are having wider levels of skepticism. And so this is a project that at its heart is about changing the cultural surround sound. So we do have some resources, again, for talking to particular families that are on the point of uptake for themselves or their children. But the longer term, kind of bigger picture work that needs to be done is changing public discourse, right? Addressing the mental models that are holding up a sense, that are allowing a sense that the vaccines are a threat somehow, right? Rather than one of the greatest scientific innovations for public health that we've had, in the last 100 years or so. And so these are resources for, again, when you are deciding what to put on your website, writing a blog post or a letter to the editor or op-ed, when you've got a chance to give a talk to a broad community audience, when you're out there, again, not trying to get a particular person to take a vaccine, but really trying to lead a more productive public conversation on immunization. And I know I've showed this to you before, but just as a reminder, the reason that work is so important is because if we think about policy as a decision that any group together decides to take or not take, any kind of organized group, we can think about that policy getting changed either by changing the specific mindsets of the specific people making the decision on that decision, or we can change the whole kind of context for many policymakers, many decision makers, by shifting public mindsets where public sentiment will go, right? Policymakers will happily follow, but they're unlikely, right, to want to go against public sentiment. So we've got 3 or 4 recommendations that I think are very applicable, pretty easy to swap in for kind of things that we're doing now that we have found are a little less effective, and I think can make a real difference in the way people are thinking and talking about childhood immunization in particular. The first is to really talk about the benefits in terms of community. And this is advice that is quite particular to that public discourse setting. I would not recommend, if you've got, a mom with a kid and the mom is freaked out about this vaccine doing something to her baby, I would not tell her, think about the community, right? That's likely to violate the sense of personal autonomy and care and concern, right, in that setting. But in a public oriented setting, if we want people to think in terms of a public health response, we have to talk in terms of public health. And the language that we have found is most effective for that is talking about community benefits. So we know, as we've talked about, one of that mental model of individualism, right? That health is kind of determined by personal choices and behaviors, and in particular, diet and exercise, right? Though that very individualistic way of thinking about health gets extended to vaccinations, where people start to say, well, that's a personal choice, and people should sure do what they want to do to protect their own health. But if they don't want to, that's for them to decide. And of course, we don't want to leave the impression that we're not respecting people's bodily autonomy, but we do need to counter that, right, with this sense that immunity, right? Widespread immunity is a collective kind of action. So again, to make the case for a public health response, we have to talk in terms of public health, using terms like widespread immunity or community immunity, and how widespread immunization can prevent the spread of infectious diseases throughout our community. So here's the language that we tested, and this was done. Our original study had about 9,500 ordinary Americans in it, and we just followed up with a follow-on study that retested and confirmed these strategies in what we called the four corners of rural America. So kind of Northwest, not Seattle and Portland, but east of the mountains in Washington and Oregon. So that part of the Northwest, Southeast, Southwest, and Midwest. And so we found that the collective benefits message was highly resonant in those areas, but only and especially when you talked about it in terms of using words like community. Collective responsibility was less of an effective kind of term there. So here's the general idea. When children are vaccinated, our whole community benefits. High childhood vaccination rates create widespread immunity, which protects the health of everyone. By coming together to support vaccination programs, our community can ensure that all children have the opportunity to grow up healthy and strong. So this is a little different from what people tend to be doing in public health and healthcare folks, healthcare providers speaking up on behalf of public health. What we're tending to see in the discourse is something like here on the left. This is a slightly adapted example from a real life example. We are speaking up as public health professionals about the facts, not to scare you or coerce you, but to emphasize the importance of vaccinating your child. We know the decision can be emotional, but should you have doubts, please discuss these with your primary physician. So I'd say this is less effective framing in light of this research, because it's doing a few things. Number one, it's reminding people of the controversy, right? We're not trying to scare you. We're not trying to coerce you. Maybe you've got doubts. Maybe it could be emotional. And I assume that framing is coming from a good place. The authors are trying to demonstrate kind of empathy, right? Where they get where their audience is coming from. They're trying to show care and concern for the audience's perspective. And those are all good impulses. But the message that's chosen here is reminding people of something we wish they'd forget, right? We're kind of amplifying the sense that there is something to be scared about by telling people, don't be scared. And then there's some other issues here. So it's framed in terms of individual benefits and an individual action, right? You want to protect your child, and what's the call to action? If you've got worries, talk to your doctor. So this is not talking in terms of public health or community health. If you've got an opportunity to say something like that in the public square, I would invite you to use that precious real estate for something more like this. We want to speak up about the importance of developing community immunity through vaccination. When our immune systems are prepared to immediately recognize and resist highly contagious diseases, it's harder for illness to spread. So this is getting into the basics of how vaccination works. It's not using the phrase herd immunity, which nobody wants to be part of a herd, especially if you're in a political context where they're constantly warning that people are becoming sheeple, so I would not, the concept is sound, but I would talk about widespread immunity or community immunity instead of that technical jargon, which just doesn't land well with people. But this is, really showing, it's still showing the care and concern, but really using that space instead of reminding people of misinformation, you're providing that essential scientific information about how widespread immunity works, in plain language. Another example of what this means to shift from that individualistic frame, or the frames we have been using, to something that's a little bit that has tested well more recently. So on the left, this is trying to, again, make the individual argument that, oh my gosh, you're putting yourself at risk if you don't do this, right? So vaccines are not only safe, they're highly effective, protecting your children from dangerous, disabling, and even deadly diseases. To keep ourselves, our children, and our loved ones safe, we need all families to vaccinate their kids and talk to your doctor if you have questions. So same sort of thing. It's reminding people of the controversy, and it's trying to motivate individual change based on ratcheting up the sense of risk a little bit, dangerous, disabling, and deadly. And a fear-based message is simply not going to be as effective on this issue as a community coming together type of message. Our research has found that clearly. Lots of other studies have found that clearly. There are times when a little bit of a sense of the problem can be effective, but you want to use those fear-based messages very carefully, and certainly not very often in that public-facing discourse. So instead, you could talk about how we come together in Ohio or South Carolina or wherever it is. We value each other and our communities. We step up when our neighbors need us. It's important that we translate that into making sure that everyone, especially children, has full access to vaccination services. That last line is a lead into my next point, which is shifting from a frame that's about uptake. There are so few of us getting them. Basically, those people are not getting the vaccines, to a frame that's about access. We have a responsibility to ensure everyone who wants to get vaccinated can get vaccinated. So I'll come to that in a minute, but I just want to show you one more example on this. This is the State Department of Health website in Louisiana, and they've taken on this framing. This is a screenshot from their website. Over time, this carousel, there's an image here of a young, happy person, right? They've got people of different ages and stages, different races, ethnicities, body types, et cetera, that kind of flip through and change over time. They've got this phrase, stronger immunities, stronger communities. I love that because as a linguist, I know if something rhymes, people are more likely to believe it's true. Fun study. They tested foes cause woes or enemies cause problems. And people thought foes cause woes was more wise and more likely to be true than the exact same sort of thing. And Kaiulani, good question. Would I say in general, community framing versus fear-based messaging works better on most, if not all, issues outside of the specific issue? I think it depends on what you mean by works. Fear works to do a lot of things. It works to put people into a reactive position. It works to short circuit reason and heighten emotion. It works to get an immediate short-term response. Those are typically not the things we want to accomplish in public health and in health equity, right? We want to do the opposite of that. So when you see people using fear-based messaging, sometimes it is working for them, but it's not doing what I think those of us on this call want to do. Typically, you do want to have some sense of urgency in your messaging. You do need to say some sort of problem, something bad is happening. It's not in line with our values. It's not optimal, because otherwise, why do we need to engage in solutions? So a little bit of discomfort, that's not good. That's not the way I want it, is good to include in our messaging. But ratcheting up the fear, they're dangerous, they're disabling, and maybe even deadly, right? That kind of using that, stacking up the fear to get a different response. Lots of research shows it doesn't work on vaccination uptake. And I think, to your point, if you're trying to do health equity work, yes, for that type of work, community-based framing, positive aspirational framing is more effective than fear framing, for sure. So here's a little bit more language that they've got here. They talk about how we maintain stronger immune systems to protect against those serious, often preventable diseases. Lots of examples of the illnesses, and we found that was important, and pointing out how it protects our own bodies, but also our those around us, family, community, and state. So that kind of messaging. Second, kind of move here is to listen for the mindsets about immunization. So I'm going to play a video here. Dorothy, if you could give me a thumbs up near the top if the video, if the sound is coming through, because otherwise I'll pause and do something else. But these are clips from our research interviews with folks across the country, different walks of life. And this was done in late 2020, early 2021. So in the kind of the height of the pandemic and lockdowns and those sorts of things, we kept trying to pull people back to all the vaccinations and children specifically, but you can kind of see a range of mindsets here.
What comes to mind for you when you think about
Thank you. Sorry.
vaccines?
Providing some sort of like shield in our bodies.
To protect you when something tries to invade your body.
To resist or fight off an infection of some sort.
Attack certain illnesses.
Build an army to counteract that virus in the future.
Controversy of people who want vaccines and people who are against it.
Divide the country between the vaccinated and unvaccinated.
It's just a big campaign and that nobody really cares, like, if it actually is safe or not.
But I think it should be an individual choice.
We should have the right not to take it.
That's for each person to decide on their own.
You want to get vaccinated, you go ahead and get vaccinated. If not, and that's okay. I'm not here to judge anyone.
So how would you explain what a vaccine is?
Vaccine is a form of medicine.
Some sort of medicine.
Medication.
A medicine. Medicine that protects against some sort of illness.
And how would you explain how a vaccine works?
I think it has like somewhat of a strand or something of the virus inside, like the vaccines.
Introduce the virus into the body, so they actually give you the virus.
Basically inject like small amounts of viruses.
The form of the virus that they put into your body to teach your cells how to fight off the actual virus.
Like a dead portion of the virus that gets injected into you. And then your body builds antibodies.
How can we know if a vaccine works?
Trials.
Clinical trials.
It is tested in the labs and things like that.
Trials and scientific studies.
Without actual testing and results, you won't really know for sure.
Clinical trials initially, and then over time, I think.
But I do feel like it will take a while for us to really know if it's working out.
The transmission rates go down, the death rates go down.
And they cease to get them in the large numbers that they were before they got the vaccines.
Over time, if you can see some of those illnesses go away.
What are the risks of vaccination?
The potential risk, especially with the newer vaccinations, I think it's just the unknown.
The risk of vaccinations is the unknown, not knowing.
There's always a risk involved, I guess, in you having a very adverse reaction.
You could have some adverse side effects.
With anything you're introducing to your body, there can be side effects.
Allergic reaction, or they have a pre-existing condition whereby the vaccine may interact negatively.
So in your mind, what are the benefits of vaccination?
Personal protection, it keeps you safe.
Protection for our bodies.
A certain level of protection.
Your body gets a chance to build up an immunity to something that could be life-threatening.
To prevent you from getting sick. Or if you do get sick, it's not as severe as it would be.
The original definition of vaccine was something to prevent disease.
It is to prevent disease.
The benefits of vaccination are like herd immunity.
The more people that are vaccinated, the more that we protect each other.
To protect as many people as we possibly can from illnesses that could potentially be devastating.
So the benefits are a healthier population.
As a society, we need to also not infect others. We keep society safe as well.
Any thoughts or reactions?
What comes to mind for you when you think about vaccines?
Providing some.
Any thoughts or reactions people want to share to any of that or questions? Otherwise, I'll
what comes?
All right, so we can see lots of ideas there. Individualistic thinking at first. It's not that there isn't any collective thinking about it, but it's definitely, personal protection, personal choice, right? Top of mind. We reanalyze that general data to really think about how families in particular might be resisting the COVID-19 vaccine in particular. And then we can kind of see some different ways that these mental models can affect the way people are making that decision. One was the idea that the disease isn't that big of a deal, right? That the risk of the infection or illness is perceived as low and the urgency is therefore also low. A different way is this idea that as a parent, I should be gatekeeping what goes into my child's body. I'm careful about sugar, I'm careful about junk food, I'm careful about social media, right? Whatever that is, I also need to, make sure that if something could be harmful, right, I'm not putting that into my child. And that got extended, right, to the COVID-19 vaccine in particular, but also MMR based on misinformation, et cetera. And so that's one place where that comes from. If there's okay. And then, a version of that is that if there's a belief that that vaccine is causing harm, right there, then it's more than just kind of general making sure good stuff gets into my kid, making sure no bad stuff gets in, but like really, no, I need to protect that child. And then there's kind of some of this sense of distrust. So the idea that it wasn't even just about the vaccines are man-made, human-made. Humans are prone to mistakes, right? And so therefore, we're never going to know if it's safe until it's been around for a really long time. And then in certain parts of America and certain communities, there's active distrust in one or more of the systems or institutions involved. So whether that is coming from a legacy of medical racism or other forms of oppression, forced sterilization, et cetera, coming from, medical institutions in targeted toward a community, whether it's political, kind of a sense of political affiliation, or just straight out conspiracy theories, right? There's a range of, kind of very legitimate and grounded versus less grounded in truth and reality ways of developing that distrust, but that is a way that people can think about it. And then finally, the sense that, okay, I can listen to the scientists, that's cool, but I also listen to other sources. I look to my social circle to see how my friends and family are thinking about this, how my faith community is thinking about it, what other, that sort of thing. So many sources of, the mommy bloggers I follow, whoever it may be, many sources of information are perceived as valid, not just medical science. So my point in going through this in some detail is to say that if we are thinking out, like if we're thinking about the specific mental models that are causing hesitancy, or distrust, or getting in the way of people supporting really strong vaccination policies, being very specific about what we're hearing and then how we respond to that is a source of reframing power for us. And I'll come back to that in a little bit and show you some of the antidotes or kind of reframing antidotes to those specific mindsets. So listening to the mindsets, third key move is really talking about improving vaccination access. So the experts that we interviewed on this told us that there's really a lot of barriers to families getting kids fully vaccinated according to the recommended schedule. Things like insurance coverage being a problem for both healthcare providers and the family. The sheer difficulty of making like multiple appointments over time, particularly if you're a family that moves a lot or doesn't have a medical home. Records being, all over the place. Again, if you're a family that's moved or doesn't have a medical home. So there are things like that in the system that make it difficult even for families who are willing to be vaccinated, right, to actually keep up with the recommended vaccines. The public, on the other hand, does not see those practical barriers, right? They assume that if people aren't vaccinated, it's just because they don't want to, and that's on them. And so one framing strategy is really to get people to see those practical barriers and to talk about our responsibility in removing them. We tested some different ways of doing that. A message that says, hey, we are failing to get vaccinated. We're failing to get kids vaccinated as a society. That one backfired. It was wildly unpopular. Another version was, hey, we're failing to provide access. We're not giving people enough access. That fell flat. People just didn't believe it. But if we said we have a responsibility to provide access and gave examples of of some of those practical difficulties, that was a very powerful way for people to say we should be putting more funding into vaccine research or federally funded vaccination centers. We should be supporting, kind of community initiatives to get the vaccines out to people, all of those sorts of things. So the general idea is to do something that's a little bit like this. When everyone can access the recommended immunizations on time, it stops preventable diseases from spreading through our communities. Nikki, great point. Linguistic access is another version of that absolutely is a practical barrier and that people just don't see. So the framing recommendation here is bring up things like that. Give this idea that we have a responsibility, that everyone has access to vaccination or immunization services, and then give 2 or 3 examples, practical examples of barriers that get in the way. So something like this: we must make sure that childhood vaccinations are widely available, easy to find, and affordable for everyone. That might mean changing our clinic locations. It might mean changing insurance reimbursement policies or more. Whatever it is, might be ensuring information is available in languages people understand. It's on us to remove the barriers that families run into when trying to get kids vaccinated. This was a highly resonant message across the political divide across the nation. So here's what that might look like. On the left, if you again imagine you've got an opportunity to speak to the public. You could, and lots of folks are using their time at the mic like this, that we're getting more and more questions from families about whether vaccinations are safe for their children. All the medical people agree, yes, they're safe and effective. There's some specific situations and you should talk to your doctor about it. That is, again, it's kind of, it's a response, it's an implicit response to the misinformation that vaccines are not safe, right? With a caveat that, of course, there are some people that for which they're not medically appropriate. But if this is a healthcare argument, what we need to be making is a public health argument if we want a public health response, and if we want those health equity kinds of moves. So here's the here's a different kind of angle. This is less about uptake and safety, more about access. So healthcare providers are hearing more and more stories from families about practical difficulties in keeping up or catching up with routine immunizations for kids. Sometimes the issue is insurance, other times it's hassles over the records. Most of these problems can be solved through better policies, and we should do that because we have a responsibility to make immunizations for children affordable and accessible. The next move, and this is really important for it in terms of making the case for childhood immunizations, but also in entering the issue through childhood vaccinations to build the overall lifespan story, right? About how vaccinations work and why they're important. And here we found that it was really helpful to talk about the long-term child well-being that vaccines promote. So right now, people often think about vaccines in terms of risk versus reward. If you think back to the video that showed people's thinking, the mental models, it was like, you kind of just don't know. You're playing the odds as to whether or not you're going to get a reaction, whether or not the disease will be bad. In our interviews, people would often say, I'm all for vaccines. I really, think they're a wonderful scientific, and public health innovation. We're so lucky to have them. They would say that. And then they would also use a lot of gambling scenarios in their language to talk about their actual decision making, which means that they're saying, on the one hand, hey, I believe that vaccines are safe and effective, but I also believe that side effects are a real risk. that needs to drive people's decision making. So keeping people in that risk scenario leads people to have less, leads people to attitudes that are going to be less supportive of ensuring widespread access and equitable access. On the other hand, the rewards are really intangible for the public. People are like, I mean, I get, how do you know it's been effective? It's a good question, because you only know if you didn't get it. And how do you know you even came in contact with it, right? And the vaccine worked. You only know when a vaccine doesn't work. And so people were having real trouble thinking about the benefits. They kind of say, yeah, I mean, I guess, over time you might eradicate a disease, but the benefits always felt far away and a little intangible. Our insight and recommendation is it's important to bring the benefits much closer in time and to make them much more concrete. And so the idea is to talk about the benefits to children's immediate development, right? That we're keeping kids growing, learning, and thriving, doing the things they love. We're keeping them healthy now so they can do the things that kids need to be doing now. We're also setting up that foundation for long-term health. So that's a shift from, on the left, protection from disease, that on-time vaccination throughout childhood is important because it helps provide immunity before they are exposed, to preparation for development. These are important because it prepares their immune system to recognize and resist contagious diseases. That's what's happening right now, right? That's a concrete thing that's happening. It's a benefit. The immune system is more prepared. And then what's the visible benefit? It keeps them healthy so they can keep growing, learning, and thriving. So the idea is that you talk about vaccination as a platform for child health, keeping them on track developmentally, keeping them focused on the things that they love to do. And related to that, which I just hinted at a little bit, is shifting the focus from the vaccine fighting disease to the immune system preparing itself. We saw in that video people's mindset that there was a lot of military language. It's fighting the disease. It's an army to attack the invaders. What we saw in our deeper interviews is that people often rely on this mental model of a war between the body and invading viruses. And in that war, they tend to think of the vaccine as either like armor or shield, like an armor or a shield or a weapon. When they think about it as a weapon, they agree that a vaccine is a good, powerful, good and powerful weapon, but they wonder, am I going to be on that battlefield? Do I need to fight that vaccine, that virus off? And so it lowers the sense of urgency. When they think about it as an armor or a shield, then they conclude that any development of any symptoms of the virus indicates a failure of the vaccine, right? We saw a lot of this because that armor has failed. The vaccine got into the virus got into the body. So first of all, it's medically inaccurate, right? Like scientifically inaccurate that's how vaccines work, that they stop the virus from entering the body. And it leads people to unhelpful conclusions, right? Like that the vaccine doesn't have benefits, even if you get symptoms. And this really, that armor and shield thinking really, colored a lot of people's reactions that we saw about the COVID-19 vaccine. If you're still going to get it, why does it help? That sort of thing. So our recommendation is don't play into that, right? It is a mental model that the public holds, but anytime we rely on military language, we're really, kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, to go with military there. What we found worked instead, and this is a new metaphor that we tested and developed here at Frameworks in partnership with AAP. It's comparing vaccinations to computer updates. We're upgrading our systems. And by doing that, we call up productive associations like prevention, I don't get the virus, ongoing maintenance, I gotta re-upload it, every so often. And also protection against network threats, right? So if your computer's got a virus, you send an email to somebody, right? Or it starts sending out stuff, right? Suddenly it's everywhere. And so it really helps people think, as particularly parents, think about the benefits to their individual child, but also the network of their school, their friends, the community at large. I'm going to show you a video that the American Academy of Pediatrics made as like a little explainer video using this metaphor, so you can see how you might be able to use it in your communications.
Anyone who has ever used a computer, cell phone, tablet, or other electronic device knows the importance of keeping the software up to date and virus-free. Well, guess what? Our immune systems need that same love and attention. Immunization is one of the greatest medical advancements of modern society. Vaccines have saved millions of lives from measles, mumps, polio, tetanus, and other life-threatening diseases. They work like software updates for your body's immune system, helping the immune system detect and react to viruses and bacteria, even after the vaccines have left the body. And when all of us do our part to stay up to date with immunizations, it keeps the entire community network healthy and strong.
So lots of the framing recommendations built into that little, 90-second or 60-second, 45-second spot, really pointing out the benefits to kids, like keeping the kids healthy and strong, focused on what they're doing, avoiding military language. It's not fighting the virus, but we're detecting and reacting. Earlier in this presentation, you may have heard me use the word recognize and resist. So just swapping in some different verbs besides fighting, right? It would be some of the ways to talk about this a little more effectively. But then also using this metaphor, or the metaphor I'll show in just a moment, to focus on it's the immune system, right? We are preparing and supporting our immune systems in ways that aren't available to us otherwise, right? And that gets people to be thinking a little bit less about the side effects or the issues with the supposed issues with the vaccine itself, and much more about kind of the immune response, which we found had, just again, channeling people's attention slightly differently can lead to all sorts of different assumptions and opinions and things down the road. Oops. Don't want that one. Okay. So if you can build that metaphor, use that metaphor directly to kind of just educate folks, like in that video. You also could build this into advocacy arguments, for a particular policy. So I think I've shared this kind of fail-proof formula for framing with you all before, leading with a high-level principle, explaining the process by which something works, then introducing your problem, leading up to a specific proposal. If we focus our attention here for a moment on this proposal box, if I wanted to get to a proposal that we should be basically, changing reimbursement codes so that doctors or other healthcare providers are getting reimbursed for vaccine counseling, and ensuring that cost is never a barrier for families because they're fully covered by insurance. That's what I want to get to. How would I build my argument up to that? Lead with this principle of child development. When kids are healthy, they focus on being kids. But those infectious diseases can pull them away from doing, what they love at that time. The process is updating the network. So to keep kids, doing what they love, we need to think about protecting them and their network. And just like the latest antivirus software protects our computer networks, widespread vaccinations keep kids from getting and spreading serious diseases. The problem are those practical barriers, but too many families run into challenges keeping up with the recommended schedule. They may delay due to cost, others have questions which pediatricians want to answer, but that takes time. So we can expand access. We can support and encourage doctors to answer those families' questions by updating our reimbursement policies, and we can ensure that cost is not a barrier for any family. So that's how you would build this metaphor into an overall advocacy argument. I know this isn't perfect, word perfect. Please don't put this, support and encourage doctors to answer families' questions by updating reimbursement policies on a bumper sticker, right? It's not ready to go for that. But this kind of argument, this kind of frame, we have good evidence. We'll get more folks to support this sort of approach. All right, last metaphor, I saved the best for last. We found that comparing the process of gaining immunity to a disease to the process of gaining literacy was powerful. We tapped into a very different set of beliefs. We opened up a different set of mental models around vaccination than what is currently kind of being reinforced constantly. So whereas people like to some extent thought, oh my gosh, the recommended schedule when I've got that little baby, it feels like every time I take them to the doctor, they're getting 4 shots. It's just a little too much for my little one. There, people are reasoning from a mental model of vaccine as like medicine, and too much is too much for a little body, right? And so that's one source of hesitancy we see. When we shift the mental models to being like that it's like the immune system is becoming more literate, then with literacy, the more the better, right? Read to your baby while it's still a bump. The earlier the better, the more the better. And so you get that sort of mental model. Also, literacy is seen as something that's really good for the individual, but also good for society as at large. And so you get again that way of making this a more collective issue without finger wagging, you should be doing your part for public health, with your own body, right? And that's where you get some of that autonomy pushback. So this metaphor was really powerful. We saw that quantitatively in national survey experiments. I'm going to show you of our 9,500 data points that we have, or really 10,000 data points at this point, one data point, which is one interview with one woman exposed to this metaphor. I don't want to suggest that everybody has this reaction, but you can see that somebody can have this reaction when being exposed to this metaphor. The metaphor is thinking about vaccines like a beginner text, like an ABC book, right? And building early literacy. When we immunize children, it's a lot like helping them learn to read. Vaccines are beginner texts that our immune systems use to practice reading a disease. And once our immune systems can understand the disease, they can respond quickly when they encounter it and resist right away. This also got people less hung up on that sense that you're putting the virus into the body. It was kind of like, well, you can continue to remember how to read once you don't have C-spot run in front of you anymore, right? And they got a little less hung up on that sense, that like it made more sense that the vaccine's work would continue to happen long after that vaccine has left the body. So let me show you how that affected this research participant.
I personally have not been vaccinated. I did have, the latest, what we're discussing, what's been going on in the world about COVID. So I have built up antibodies. Explaining how it works is basically having the health system incorporate certain medicines, I guess, that can combat together. The risks, I would think, is kind of like what's going on now, even though, people have had their second shots, and now because of the new strand, now they're getting boosters. So, okay, so now you have Delta, now you have Omicron. I mean, what else is going to come? And you're just going to have to keep boosting and boosting and boosting. Whereas before, like for, let's just say the flu, I just get one shot for a year. I don't get a booster. Of course, I don't get the flu, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the shot worked. And because I haven't been vaccinated, I can't really say that I'm at a big risk, because I've been doing pretty good without it. It makes sense that it's just like reading and writing. It's just giving you the ability to increase your knowledge, your body's knowledge. So your body is getting more knowledgeable as, like in reading and writing. As a child, you're growing in what the aspect is of your body. So your body is growing and knowing, that it's getting better in deciphering what the benefits are. About the risks, God, kind of looking at that, I really don't see that there's any risks. Your body is like the student, and the vaccine is like the teacher giving you what you need to learn to read and write. That's pretty interesting. Okay. I really kind of like that aspect.
Okay, all right.
Kind of got my mind kind of going differently about this vaccine.
Okay.
I personally.
Sorry, I usually I'm using a slightly different software today, and so I keep hitting the wrong button to get out of a video. Sorry for that. So you can see how that metaphor really shifted that individual's thinking, just channeled her attention in a different direction, allowed her to take in new information and see the issue from a different vantage point. That's really what we're going for by shifting mental models to reframe an issue. So if we think about the mental models that we heard before, particularly from families, the disease isn't a big deal. I need to gatekeep my child's body. I need to protect my child from that vaccine. I can't trust it, or I listen to other sources. Here we have some of these strategies can help you move some of these mindsets. So when people say, the risk is not that big, right? You want to emphasize that the vaccination keeps kids moving, growing, thriving, learning, doing the things they need to be doing as kids to develop and set themselves up for a healthy and productive life. So that platform for child health is one way to bring if the threat seems distant and not that big, you want to bring the benefit closer and bigger. I'm the gatekeeper for my child's body. The platform for child health can also, right, help with that. The sense that you want the good things to be getting into your child, right? The play, the being at school, participating in their activities, being around family, all those sorts of things. If the sense is that the vaccine actually has some sort of risk. Here, that beginner text metaphor, that literacy metaphor, we found it was just as you saw, it really reduced that one interviewee sense of risk. Across the larger sample, we saw it really reduced people's sense of risk, and particularly parents' sense of risk. I didn't get in here today into strategies for building trust, particularly in communities where they have not they've been treated in ways that suggest that people are untrustworthy. And so I didn't get into that too much today, but the most important thing you can do in that situation is build a relationship. Expressing your care and your concern that you yourself are a trustworthy person, that sets you up, right, to be able to be heard in a different way. In that case, the relation, you're building a relationship, not necessarily building towards an uptake decision, right, in that moment, but you want to build a different kind of relationship. That's a whole nother set webinar. I listen to other sources. You don't want to start disparaging other sources, but you do want to hear the idea of talking about community, that we in our community, okay, so you care about those around you and what they're saying. We also need to ensure that we're showing up for our neighbors and doing what we can to prevent diseases from moving from our community. So those are some of the things that we found in this study. I feel really hopeful about the potential of these reframes for reclaiming the conversation, but they will only work if people like you and use them. And so I'm really curious about any of your comments, questions, or reactions. You can come off mute, raise your digital hand, or add your thoughts to the chat. How do these kinds of framing strategies sound to you? How do they feel like they might be helpful? If there's anything that you think would kind of, if a lot of you are not communicating about this, I wonder if part of that was hesitancy on your own part to get into it because it's so polarized. I do have a high degree of confidence that these strategies will let you have conversations that are worth having, as opposed to some of the conversations that are just going to be endless rounds of frustration. So curious for your reactions or comments here. Thank you, Sean. Okay. Well, as always, thank you for showing up here, but also showing up in your communities all day, every day to advance health equity. Dorothy has put the session evaluation in the chat. Before you go, please, please, please open it up, fill it out. And I want to remind you all that we are available for technical assistance. So if you are starting to reframe issues, whether they're about the topics that we've talked about specifically, but they can also be related, anything in the kind of public health equity space. You name it, we can help you reframe it in that area, and we are available to you to comment on things, be part of a meeting or a discussion, you know, just whatever you think might be helpful. And we are also building a toolkit for you, and we'll have some opportunities to touch base with you or some of the folks on the, Dorothy, what's it called? Like the advisory council. Some of your peers are representatives on a meeting, in a meeting that meets regularly. So we'll be tapping your thoughts on kind of what would be useful to help you communicate more effectively. That's it for now. Happy Friday Eve. I'm gonna miss you all, but I will be doing some more work in the sidelines, and so this isn't the last time we'll connect, I hope. Dorothy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Julie. We really, really appreciate you talking through all of these reframing strategies through the last 3 sessions. And so, yes, just to reinforce what Julie was sharing, please do, if you are, wanting to workshop some of these strategies, please do reach out to Frameworks. They are here to support you throughout the rest of this stretch journey. And so we did pop in the evaluation. So if you can take a moment to just complete that for us, we do really appreciate it. And next month, we'll actually be sending a little bit of pre-work to you all for the session. And so please keep an eye out for that. And it will get you ready for some of the activities during that session. So want to thank you all again for joining us this afternoon. Keep an eye out for the newsletter on October 10th, and contact your core teams with any questions. And we'll see you again in a month. Hope everybody has a nice afternoon. And again, happy Friday Eve. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.